You know that gut feeling you get when something feels off? I wish I'd trusted mine. It all started on move-in day. James and I were pumped to finally share a dorm room in college. The place was old and creaky, but we figured it had charm. Our third roommate, Daniel, seemed like a quiet, normal guy, polite, even. He smiled at us when we introduced ourselves and said, "I don't talk much, but I'm easy to live with." Sounded perfect. At first, it was fine. Daniel kept to himself, spent a lot of time at the library, and didn't bother us. But there were these little things that stood out. His side of the room was way too clean, like, no posters, no snacks, no personal stuff. Just his bed, his desk, and a stack of notebooks that were always perfectly lined up. He had this closet he kept locked all the time, which was weird, but we didn't think much of it. The first strange thing happened a few nights in. I woke up to this faint scratching noise. It sounded like nails dragging along the wall. I thought maybe it was the building settling or something. But then I noticed Daniel sitting up in his bed, completely still, staring at the wall. I called his name softly, "Daniel? You okay?" He didn't answer, just slowly turned his head toward me. Then, just like that, he laid back down and turned away. The next morning, I told James about it, and he just laughed it off. "Dude, he's probably just a sleepwalker or something. Relax." I tried to shake it off, but that scratching noise kept happening, every single night. It was always coming from Daniel's side of the room. Then there were his routines. Daniel never ate meals with us. Whenever we invited him, he'd just say, "I already ate." He was always pacing at night, whispering under his breath. Sometimes, I'd catch snippets of what he was saying, but it was never anything that made sense. Words like prepare and watching. I told myself he was just quirky. One day, James and I came back from class, and things were off. My books weren't where I left them. James' backpack was unzipped. Nothing was missing, but we both noticed it. When we asked Daniel if he'd been messing with our stuff, he just shook his head. "I don't touch other people's things," he said, his voice flat. But the way he looked at us, like he was trying to figure out something, gave me chills. The turning point came when I found one of Daniel's notebooks left open on his desk. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the pages caught my eye. They were filled with messy, repetitive phrases like, asterisk, "They're watching. Must prepare." Asterisk, but what really freaked me out were the sketches. They were of James and me, drawings of us sleeping in our beds. My stomach dropped. I showed James, and we decided to confront Daniel. That night, we waited until Daniel went to the bathroom, then James picked the lock on his closet. Inside, we found something that made my blood run cold. There were photos of us. Not just random photos, pictures of us inside the room, taken while we were asleep. There was also a small toolkit with knives and duct tape, but everything looked untouched, like he was waiting for something. Before we could do anything, Daniel walked back in. He didn't yell or freak out. He just stared at us. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. His voice was calm, but there was something in his tone that made my skin crawl. He closed the closet, locked it, and got into bed without another word. James and I were wide awake that night, whispering about what to do. "We need to tell someone," I said. But James shook his head. "If we go to the RA with just photos, they'll think we're overreacting. We need something more." We didn't have to wait long. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the door locking from the inside. My heart was pounding before I even opened my eyes. Daniel was standing by the door, holding something in his hand, his toolkit. He wasn't yelling or acting wild. He was calm, which somehow made it worse. They told me to wait, he whispered, but now I can't. I grabbed James' arm. Daniel, what are you doing? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer. He just started walking toward us. James jumped out of bed and grabbed a chair, holding it in front of him like a shield. Stay back! James shouted. Daniel didn't stop. He lunged toward James, but I grabbed the lamp off my desk and smashed it against his arm. The toolkit fell to the floor, and James and I made a break for the door. It was still locked. My hands were shaking as I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Daniel was back on his feet, moving toward us again. I grabbed a chair and threw it at the window, shattering the glass. Come on! I yelled, climbing out onto the balcony. James followed, and we started shouting for help. Campus security got there fast. When they came into the room, Daniel didn't fight back. He just sat on his bed, staring at the wall, like nothing had happened. They found the photos and the toolkit in his closet. Turns out, Daniel had been suspended from another college for stalking. James and I moved to a different dorm after that, but the fear never really went away. I keep thinking about the way Daniel looked at us that last night. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even hate. It was like he saw us as something less than human. Something to study. Something to prepare for. I didn't think my new college roommate would turn out to be dangerous. At first, Eric seemed like the perfect roommate, friendly, polite, and always smiling. He had this calm way of talking that made me feel like I could trust him. When we first met, he shook my hand and said, "We're gonna be a great team this year." I believed him. But looking back, I wish I had paid more attention to the little things. The first week went by without any problems. We set up our room, talked about our schedules, and even shared a few meals together. Eric was super organized, almost obsessively so. His side of the room was spotless. His books were stacked perfectly, and his clothes were always folded neatly. I remember joking, "You're putting me to shame with how clean you are." He just laughed and said, "I like to keep things in order." At first, I thought it was just a personality quirk. But then I started noticing other things, things that didn't seem so harmless. Eric would lock the door even when I was inside. I'd be sitting at my desk, and he'd get up, lock the door, and sit back down like it was no big deal. I asked him about it once, and he said, "You can't be too careful. People steal stuff around here." It made sense at the time, so I didn't question it. But then there was the social media thing. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. and saw the glow of Eric's laptop. He was scrolling through my Instagram page, looking at pictures I had posted months ago. I asked him what he was doing, and he jumped like I'd caught him doing something wrong. He quickly shut his laptop and said, "Just checking out your pictures. You've had some fun trips." I didn't think much of it, but it felt off. Things got weirder when I noticed a photo of mine pinned to his corkboard. It wasn't a picture I had shared or printed, it was one I had taken on my phone but never posted anywhere. I stared at it for a long time, trying to figure out how he got it. When I finally asked him, he just smiled and said, "Oh, I found it online somewhere." That didn't make sense, but I didn't press him. I didn't want to seem paranoid. A few weeks later, I accidentally knocked over Eric's notebook while he was out. I bent down to pick it up, and it flipped open to a page filled with handwriting. At first, I thought it was just class notes, but then I saw my name. The page was covered in detailed notes about me, what time I woke up, what I ate, when I left for class. There were even little notes about things I had said, like, John seemed annoyed today. Maybe I should back off. My stomach dropped. Why would he be writing all this? And then I saw a sketch. It was a drawing of my face. Underneath it, in bold letters, were the words, "I know everything about you." I slammed the notebook shut and put it back where I found it. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was probably just some weird hobby or a joke I didn't understand. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard Eric get up. I opened my eyes just enough to see him standing by my bed, staring at me. My heart was pounding, but I pretended to be asleep. After a few minutes, he went back to his side of the room and lay down. I didn't sleep at all that night. Over the next few days, I started noticing more things. My keys and wallet would be moved when I hadn't touched them. My backpack was ripped open one morning, and my journal was missing. In its place was a note that said, "You can't hide from me." I wanted to confront Eric, but every time I thought about it, I felt frozen. What if he snapped? One night, I came back to the room early and found Eric going through my desk. He didn't even look guilty. He just said, "I was looking for a pen." But his voice was different, calm, but with this edge that made my skin crawl. I didn't say anything. I just nodded and left the room. That was the final straw. I decided I couldn't stay there anymore. I started sleeping in the library or crashing on a friend's couch. I packed up my stuff little by little, so Eric wouldn't notice. But he must have known. One night, he confronted me. He picked the lock on our door and walked in while I was trying to pack. "You're avoiding me," he said, his voice low and steady. "Why are you acting so weird?" I tried to stay calm. "I'm not avoiding you," I said. "I've just been busy." He stepped closer. "You think I don't notice?" "I notice everything." I managed to talk my way out of the situation, telling him I was just stressed about school. He eventually backed off, but I knew I couldn't stay another night. The next morning, I moved out without saying a word. I told the campus housing office everything and filed a report, but by the time they looked into it, Eric was gone. No one knew where he went. A few weeks later, I got an email from an anonymous account. It was a picture of me in my new dorm, taken from outside my window. To this day, I don't know how he found me, but I do know one thing: I'll never feel safe again. The moment I stepped into my dorm room, I knew something was off. At first, I thought it was just nerves. I mean, I was 18, thousands of miles from home in England, and starting college in a whole new country. But then I met my roommate, Evan, and that strange feeling only grew stronger. Evan seemed nice enough at first, friendly, even. He smiled a lot, asked where I was from, and offered to help me unpack. He talked about how he liked things to stay neat and quiet, which I thought was great because I wasn't looking for any wild parties. But the longer we talked, the more I noticed how he never quite made eye contact. And when he did, it felt weird. Like he was studying me, like I was some kind of experiment. I tried to shake it off. Maybe he was just shy, or maybe I was overthinking things. After all, I was jet-lagged and overwhelmed. But then, as we unpacked, I noticed something strange. Evan's side of the room was practically empty. No posters, no books, no personal items. Just a mirror on his desk and a locked trunk under his bed. I asked about it, and he just said, "I travel light." That night, as I lay in bed trying to fall asleep, I heard something, scratching. It was faint, like nails dragging across wood. I froze, my heart pounding. The sound was coming from Evan's side of the room. I glanced over, but he was lying still in his bed, his back to me. The scratching stopped, and I told myself it was just the old building making noises. The next few days weren't much better. Evan had these rules. He said them casually, like they weren't a big deal, but they felt controlling. "Don't touch my trunk," he'd say. Or, "Don't come back before 9 p.m., I need my alone time to focus." I didn't want to start any drama, so I went along with it, but it felt off. Then there was the cold. Evan insisted on keeping the room freezing. He said he couldn't sleep if it was too warm, so I'd wake up every night shivering, huddled under my blanket. One night, I woke up and saw him sitting at his desk in the dark, staring at his mirror. He wasn't doing anything, just staring at his reflection. When I asked him what he was doing, he said, "Just thinking." Then he got up and went back to bed like it was normal. Things started disappearing after that. At first, it was small things, a pen here, a notebook there. I thought I was just being forgetful. But then I noticed my water bottle was gone. My passport was missing. I asked Evan about it, but he just shrugged and said, "Maybe you misplaced it." His calmness made my skin crawl. One evening, I came back early from class to grab a textbook I'd forgotten. The door was locked from the inside. I knocked, and it took him a long time to answer. When he finally opened the door, he looked annoyed. "I told you not to come back early," he said, like I'd broken some unspoken rule. His tone was calm, but his eyes, there was something behind them. Something I couldn't figure out. I tried to push it out of my mind until the night I accidentally knocked over his mirror. I was moving some books on his desk, and it tipped over. On the back of the frame, there was this red smear. It looked like dried paint or something else. I asked him about it, and his whole face changed. He didn't yell, but his voice was cold. "Don't touch my things," he said. Then he picked up the mirror, cleaned it off, and put it back like nothing had happened. The last straw came a few nights later. I woke up to the sound of shuffling. When I opened my eyes, I saw Evan standing over me, holding my phone. "What are you doing?" I asked, sitting up so fast I almost hit my head on the wall. He smiled, this calm, eerie smile, and said, "Just checking the time." Then he put my phone back on my desk and went back to bed. The next day, while Evan was at class, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to open his trunk. I knew it was wrong, but I had to know what he was hiding. It took some effort, but I managed to pop the lock. What I found inside still haunts me. There were my missing items, my passport, my water bottle, even some clothes I didn't realize were gone. But there were other things too. A notebook filled with detailed notes about me, what time I left the room, what I ate, who I talked to. There were even sketches of me, sleeping in my bed. My hands were shaking as I closed the trunk. That's when I heard the door open. Evan stood there, staring at me. His face was completely blank. "You weren't supposed to see that," he said, locking the door behind him. I backed away, stammering something about being curious. He didn't move toward me, but the way he stood there, blocking the door, made it clear I wasn't getting out without a fight. I grabbed the desk lamp and swung it at him, managing to knock him off balance. While he stumbled, I unlocked the door and ran as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I found the resident assistant and told them everything. Campus security searched the room and found everything I described. Evan was removed from campus, but I still don't feel safe. Even now, in a new dorm, with a new roommate, I sleep with one eye open. Because sometimes, the scariest thing isn't what you leave behind. It's who you share a room with.